Welcome to my channel, everybody. I hope you're all doing fantastically well out there. I do apologise for my recent output of videos being so lacking. Unfortunately, I have not been in the country in August. Basically, I've only had maybe 5-6 days in Scotland. All the rest I've been down south. Anyway, I think we should continue with my stories. Well, these stories are all from Reddit users. They are meant to be true stories. It is entirely up to you guys to believe them or not. I hope you will enjoy them, my friends. Anyway, without further much ado, I think we should actually get on with it, shouldn't we? See you in a bit, my friends. See you in a bit. The first thing that happened to me on my grandmother's farm. I was about 11 when this happened. My older cousin Daniel, about 13, and I were playing hide and seek outside my grandmother's yard. She owned a large farm in Tennessee, just over 1,000 acres, and I grew up there my entire life, and so did Daniel. So it was nothing for us to wander off and play in areas that probably weren't safe for the average kid, but we knew the property like the back of our hand. It just so happened that the day before this happened, a lot of trees were cut down to make room for a new mobile home by the roadside that she intended to rent out for extra income. Daniel and I naturally gravitated towards this new unfamiliar landscape to play because it was something new to explore. All of the trees had been stripped of their branches and placed in logging trucks and hauled off. The branches, however, were all piled in a tangled mess about 50 feet wide, 12 to 15 feet tall. They were packed so densely that you couldn't see through them from one side to the other. It was during about the half-hour mark, when it was my turn to find Daniel, that I began to suspect that he was hiding in the woods deeper than our stated rules allowed. I remember calling his name for several minutes and hearing nothing but a quiet giggle coming from the woods. I was on the newly cut clearing looking into the woods and getting more upset by the minute. Finally, I announced as loudly as I could that I wasn't going to play fairly, that I was going to get in and get a glass of tea and watch television with Grandma. I started backing up the hill towards the house. It was at that moment I was walking past the brush pile, basically centred beside it, that I heard an unfamiliar voice. "You gave up quickly?" I stopped. I called out Daniel. It didn't sound like Daniel, but the voice responded, "Yes, I am Daniel. I am inside of the limbs." I looked at the brush pile and didn't see anyone. Again, I heard the odd voice calling out, "If you do not see me, then you have not found me, and I have won the game." I stepped closer and yelled out to the voice, "Why are you talking so funny?" The voice replied, "I am inside all of the limbs. Look aside and you will see me, Daniel." Something felt very strange about the way this guy was talking, but 11-year-old me just rationalised it, thinking maybe his voice sounds different behind the shrubbery, and he sounds like he's talking funny because his voice sounds different. I stepped up to the edge of the brush pile and pulled the branches apart, looking inside. And there was Daniel. His head was turned towards the top of the hill, but his body was facing me. I yelled out, "I caught you!" His head shifted towards me, and he had the single most disgusting smile I've ever seen to this very day. Imagine if someone had the absolute worst of intentions and they're trying to hide behind a fake innocent smile to gain your trust. But they couldn't help their glee with the thought that you may have fooled you. That was the best way I could describe the smile. I was so shocked by his wicked facial expression on my cousin's face that I froze in place. The hairs on my neck and arms all raised, and I could suddenly feel my blood running through my body like the temperature had dropped inside my veins. I stammered through the woods, "How did you get in there?" He responded, "I fell into the inside of the limbs, cousin. I will need you to give me help, or I will continue to be trapped." I didn't notice this at the time, how oddly he phrased his sentences, and it only occurred to me afterwards that his lips were not moving when he spoke. He never changed his face from twisting, unnerving smile. I didn't immediately notice any of these things because I was too distracted by the large stick that was plunged deeply into the side of his neck. I noticed in that moment that he had a slow, steady, trickling stream of blood flowing from the half-dollar-sized stick in his neck and down across his right shoulder, down his chest. That was enough to jolt my feet awake, and before my brain realised I was trying to run, I was already halfway up the hill to my grandmother's house. When I burst through the door of my grandmother's living room, Daniel was curled up in a ball on the couch and crying hysterically. My grandmother was sitting beside him, trying her best to get him to explain what was wrong. All he would say is there's a little boy in the woods who tagged him, and when he was hiding, he thought it wasn't really me. He wouldn't say anything else. I was crying and shaken up by this point and told my grandmother what I had seen. She made both of us lunch and then called my uncle to come pick Daniel up. I stayed at my grandmother's house that night, and I bet she asked me what happened 100 times. She asked so many questions, it was as if she was committing it to memory. I remember being relieved that she believed me, but at the same time I just wanted her to tell me it was all my imagination and help me forget about it. The next day, my grandmother set the brush pile on fire, and I watched for hours from the safety of the living room window as it slowly deteriorated into a pile of ash and ember. My cousin never did tell me what really happened to him that day. He refused to talk about it. I will say this though, he wouldn't talk to me for a year and a half after that day. We were so close when we were little, but that event, whatever the hell it was, it drove a wedge between us that changed our relationship forever.
Thank you for the great support, I really do appreciate it. If you are enjoying what I'm doing, why not think about subscribing to my channel? It is free and would help me a great deal.
'90s toy. This is a story told by my sister and confirmed by my mom. My mom keeps a lot of our old toys from the 90s in her attic. The attic is just a storage area, nobody has beds up there. The bedrooms are all under the attic, and my sister's room is at the opposite side of the house and my parents' room. One night my sister got home late from working night shift at the hospital. She randomly started to hear some faint music, but had no idea where it was coming from. After some sleuth work, she realised the music was only in one corner of the room. She got scared and woke my mom up to see what was going on. They realised the music was coming from the attic. When they mustered the courage to go up and see what was playing it, they discovered there was an old toy at the bottom of our 90s toy box. The batteries had to have been at least 25 years old, and nobody had been in the attic. It started playing by itself out of nowhere. Welcome one and all. I hope everyone is enjoying these stories. Do you think they're true? Or do you think they're not very true? They're meant to be true, my friends. They're meant to be true. Anyway, I hope you are enjoying the content. If you're enjoying what I'm doing, why not think about a little subscribe, my friends? Anyway, without further much ado, let's continue with the rest of the stories. Take care. I shall see you all very soon. How was my father in two places at once? First off, a little backstory on my dad. The man has so much character and colour to him. Though he is mostly a chilled out grandpa at this point, whose biggest offences are the likes of placing a box of dead kittens in the Topic hat when my family plays charades at the Christmas Eve get together. When I was a kid, he was a crazy person. He was an amazing father, honest to a fault, and had character made of stone. He apologised when he felt he was wrong, and he would sit and cry with you when things were eating away at your self-esteem. However, as much as I owe him my morality and compassion towards others, I also owe him my extremely demented and nothing is sacred sense of humour. The man got more joy from life in tormenting his children than anything else. We lived on my grandmother's farm in rural Tennessee, and when the power would go out, which happened a lot in our area, he would dare me to run to the mailbox and then lock me outside. 10 o'clock at night, when I'm about 10 years old. And he would laugh so hard I could hear him over my screams while I banged on the door from outside, pleading to be let back in. He was the type of dad to wake you up in the morning by revving a chainsaw, change the clocks in the house to make you get ready for school at 2 a.m, and stand on the front porch in his tight whities while you were getting on the bus in the morning and yell, "I love you, I'm gonna miss you so bad," in a voice that could only imply he was suffering from a severe brain damage. In other words, he was always looking for a way to scare you, embarrass you, or just make you have such a crazy, unexpected experience that you would be guaranteed to remember him forever, and it worked. I love that man. Now, that was needed for context, and this story takes place in my second to last year on my grandmother's farm. I was 17 and had been working a small job in town, stocking beer coolers and mopping floors at the local gas station. I was driving home from work in my little truck. At about 10 p.m, as I pulled into the driveway, my headlights shone up the hill to my grandmother's house and panned down the hill to the edge of our single-wide mobile home. I stopped immediately, all 4 tyres in the driveway pointing straight to the end of that straight stretch of gravel. I could see my dad. His old flatbed truck and my stepmother's minivan were parked pointing to the left, at the base of our trailer. He was standing behind them, with his back to my headlights. Our chocolate lab, Cassie, sat at his feet, staring intently at him, paying no attention to the vehicle entering her territory, which was highly unlike her. I only stopped because it was so late and so unusual for my dad to be outside at this time. It was in the middle of the week. He was usually passed out in the recliner wearing nothing but his underwear, with the History Channel quietly rambling on about the Civil War by this time. I slowly proceeded down the drive. Our driveway was about half a football field in length, and as I drove slowly towards the bottom of the drive, my dad began to walk, still with his back turned to me, and a step behind the vehicles, the height of my stepmom's van fully concealing him. It took another 15 seconds from that point for me to reach the end of the drive, and I pulled my truck in on the side of its flatbed, leaving me closest to the road. I grabbed my big gulp and got out of the truck. "Dad!" No response. "Dad!" Still nothing. Immediately I got a bit creeped out, but then thought to myself nearly as quick, this dude is trying to scare me again. He must think I didn't see him. I got down on my knee and peered under the vehicles. His left boot, unmistakable, Cassie's back legs and butt right beside him, tail tucked between her legs. I hollered out, "You're doing a crappy job of hiding, Dad. I could see your boot sticking out from behind the tyre on the van." I watched as his left boot slowly slid to the right until it was concealed behind the tyre, with the other. Still no response. I called for the dog. "Cassie!" She turned and literally scurried beneath the vehicles to get to me, as if she was under heavy gunfire. She was whimpering when she got to me and acting very strange, as if she was terrified. She was acting how I would imagine a dog would act if they were constantly beat on, and I had never seen her behave that way before. When she got to me and I placed my hand on her, I could almost hear her breathe a sigh of relief. She was sticking to my legs like glue, and as I was standing down on one knee and a bit off balance, she nearly knocked me over. I pet on her for a moment and tried to comfort her, but she seemed like she was afraid of something. With her tail still tucked between her legs, she pushed herself in between my legs as I stood up. It was after seeing how timid and odd Cassie was acting that I decided I may be misreading the situation and I might need to get into the house. My dad was surely a prankster, but when was caught, he was caught. He never dragged things out once we caught on. He would come out and say something like, "I guess your kids ain't as gullible as they used to be. I'm going to have to start stepping it up a notch." Dad didn't drink much, and never got drunk really, but I couldn't think of what the root of this odd behaviour could possibly be, and it's really starting to weird me out. I made one last attempt at communication. "Dad, I know you're there. I saw you when I pulled in the driveway. The jig is up. What are you doing out here?" No response. I started around the front of my truck to round the vehicles and walk over to him. Cassie began to panic and whimper loudly, still glued to inside of my ankles, crouched to the gravel with her head darting back and forth. Wildly, I stopped in front of my truck. We stand there for another moment in silence, waiting for something, but not sure what. And then announce, "Well, I'm heading in. See you in a bit, weirdo." I turn to walk to the front porch, unconsciously building speed as I hit the first step. Cassie drops back and doesn't follow me into the porch. It seems to sort of stand guard at the front of the steps. Keys in hand, I'm already searching for the deadbolt key. Panic is building in my chest, but I'm not sure why. I hurriedly unlock the door and jump into the house, swing around and slam the door behind me, locking the deadbolt in one fluid motion. From behind me, I hear a voice yell, "What the hell?" I spin around, my big gulp drops to the floor and explodes across the living room floor. There sits my dad in his underwear, sitting up from a deep sleep in his recliner. I begin to hyperventilate and yell through a gasp of air that there is a man in the driveway hiding behind the van. "I thought he was you. I was talking to him, Dad." I nearly collapsed into the floor. Within 15 seconds, my dad is running out the back door of the house with a spotlight and a handgun, still wearing nothing but his underwear. He was outside for what felt like forever. When he came in, he was pale as a sheet. He said someone was definitely out there, but you couldn't see them. You could hear them running, but when he pointed the spotlight in the direction of the footsteps, there was no one there. Crazy thing is, our trailer sat in front of a 150-acre cornfield, and it was off-season, so everything was tiled down to the dirt. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. The thing is though, my dad has an unmistakable posture, and an even more unmistakable walk. I know those were his boots I saw under the van. I also know that if he had somehow set all this up, I would have been heard about it for years, because it would have been one of his favourite stories to tell. How he scared me so bad when I was 17, and how funny it would have been. It was a terrifying experience, and you know it's one that seems easy to explain. My brain really wants to tell me that I had just foiled a car thief or something, or maybe even stopped a possible home invasion. He does tell people about this from time to time, but he always ends with the same detail, that it wasn't until he was outside running around in his underwear with a handgun that I realised that Cassie had been sleeping in the floor next to his recliner when I ran in the door. Thank you for watching my video. If you enjoyed the video, why don't you think about giving me a little subscribe on YouTube? I would appreciate that very much. Until next time, I will see you later.